I mean, I think there are some questions as to whether in the wash-up period with other legislation on the table, whether this is what could be discussed. For example, again, for the record, I support the greyhound racing bill. I think it's broadly a good thing. But on the table, there are things like the ecocide law that's been proposed, and actually that could have been put to a vote, which I would say would be a much more consequential piece of legislation, not just in Scotland but worldwide. And I would ask whether that is, if we're prioritising bills that would have a kind of substantial effect in what little time there is left in the Scottish parliamentary term, whether that is something that really needed to be at the top of that list. Now,
Mhm.
am I glad it passed? Absolutely. Would I have liked to seen that parliamentary time used on something else? Quite possibly. And I think that speaks to the fact that if you look at the legislation that has been passed over the last few years, you see a rush, and it was the same in 2021. There was a massive rush of legislation towards the end of the parliamentary term in the lead up to the 2021 election. Granted, a significant portion of that was because of the coronavirus pandemic and the like, but also you do see a rush for um, legislation to be passed in the last few weeks before the election. And I think that isn't just because people are worried that they're going to miss the opportunity to pass the bills that they're bringing forward, but it is also an opportunity for people to stick things on leaflets. And I think that um, I would be very very surprised if the parties that voted for the Greyhound racing bill are not using that as at least some level of campaigning material for the next couple of months. And I think that having a bill that is largely quite friendly and largely would be supported. We saw it was quite overwhelming actually, the number of MSPs who supported it in Holyrood. That's quite a happy clappy bill. Most people would support it. But actually, if you're getting into a substantial debate about ecocide, for example, I think that that's a much more nuanced conversation and it would require a much heavier debate. And I think that that's where I would like to see what limited time we maybe have left in this Scottish Parliament used. But I think that ship has sailed, unfortunately.